Hi, John. Thank you so much for joining me today in our second installment of our series, Real Cyber Assurance with Johnny and Eddie. This is the only video cast that you're going to see that involves an experienced insurance producer talking with a very seasoned cybersecurity expert on the issues that are facing small businesses today and in the future. My name is Eddie Canavan. I am the insurance producer and claims advisor for Alta Claims and Insurance Services. We are a licensed insurance broker in multiple states. I've been in the industry for 30 years. I've done pretty much every job you can imagine in administering claims and advising clients on best practices, how to avoid claims, how to mitigate claims, and how to resolve claims. Johnny?
Hey, Eddie. Great seeing you again. It's always nice to chat with you. I think we make a dynamic duo. We're like peanut butter and jelly here. We got the cybersecurity insurance, and we've got the cybersecurity. I'm an expert in the field. I've been in cybersecurity 35 years, wrote this book. You can get it on Amazon. It's called Don't Hack, How to Kick Hackers to the Curb. I would recommend people buy the electronic copy. It's close to 800 pages. So if you want to carry around an 800-page book, that's great. It weighs about 4 pounds. But the electronic copy, you can jump back and forth. So we have the knowledge that you need for everything that covers cybersecurity insurance and cybersecurity. So Eddie, let's roll.
So we're in a really unique time right now. Companies need cyber insurance. The cyber losses are going through the roof. It's causing the market to harden, premiums to go up, limits to go down. And I know you have some stats to back up the fact that the market is just getting very, very difficult to traverse.
Well, people may not realize this, especially if they're a small business owner, but 70% of all data breaches happen to companies with less than 100 employees. So that means that hackers are going after small businesses because they don't have the defenses. Now, 30% of all data breaches are happening at medical facilities. Why? Because that's where the big payout is. In the year 2020 alone, $21 billion was paid in ransomware. Now, this is a fact. Part-timers and your least technical employees are the victims of 95% of ransomware scams. And that makes total sense, right? Your IT department's not going to fall for it, but people whose day job isn't dealing with hackers and scammers, they're going to be more likely to fall victim to these email scams. And some of the other things we've talked about in the other show is phishing expeditions, spear phishing, and IT folks and more technical people are just too savvy for that. But if you're in sales, if you're in HR, if you're in legal, your plate is already full. So it's not a big surprise that you get hit with some kind of phishing scam.
So let's unpack this a bit. So small business actually is the majority employer of this country. I just assumed, watching the news, that really hackers were targeting big Fortune companies. But that's really not the case. They are actually targeting smaller businesses. And to your point, it's because there are a myriad of things that are leading to that. And you noted some of them, but I think other issues that small businesses don't really understand is when you are building your website and you are doing e-commerce on that site, and you hire somebody to put that together in a way that you feel is safe, but perhaps they cut corners or maybe they do something incorrectly here or there. Johnny, is there a way for a small business owner to question the web developer, to ask some questions to make sure that they're not opening themselves up to unnecessary breaches?
Well, you could be compliant today, and tomorrow you find out that there's a new exploit out there that will cause a breach. So people need to be alert all the time, small business owners especially, because you will have folks wearing multiple hats. And where I worked, like IBM, I was able to have teams around me of people. So if I went on vacation, I knew there were people that could step right in. For a small business, if someone's sick or they go on vacation, it's a much harder role to fill if someone's been the expert and they're gone. So basically, I actually wrote an article that had the A to Z game plan. People could look it up from JohnE Upgrade. It was for Loss Prevention magazine, and it's applicable to the small business. It's applicable to the largest corporation. If they follow these principles, and most of them are free, they'll be able to build a structure and a framework that will allow them to be as covered as possible. So if you're a business owner, you really need to know what's going on. You can't just throw it over the fence to someone else, because when you look at it, the people that you hire as a third party, they're going to try to do the least amount of work for the most amount of money that they can, right? I mean, just like any business, there's some people that will strive to give Rolls-Royce type quality, Ferrari level, but they'll charge the most. And then you'll have others that will undercut them, but they will have to make their money somewhere.
Is there a way to test websites, especially e-commerce sites? For example, I'm going to be putting on a conference in February, and I'm going to build a site in which people can register for that conference and pay their registration fee. And so when I'm hiring somebody to construct that site, knowing that I'm going to have credit card numbers, email addresses, really sensitive information, how do I know that there's not vulnerabilities?
You won't. The best thing you could do is look at their track record, find out who they've worked with, but you will still not know the back end as far as did they use one vendor for their credit cards and they switched to another because it was less expensive. I mean, you will not know that, but you'll be able to see by their track record. I mean, there's not Yelp reviews for everybody, right? Some people might be at the top of their field and they're not even going to have Yelp reviews in there. So I would take a few bids actually, and maybe pay a little more to find someone that's better. But I would also ask to talk to a customer or two and see how their experience was, because the potential vendor is going to build themselves up, obviously, right? Wouldn't you?
Right.
If you were selling produce, you'd say you have the best produce in the state, when there might be better produce down the block. But with the vendors, you can find out who is doing a great job, mostly by the customers and how they're satisfying the customers. But I mean, there's no guarantees in this world, especially in cybersecurity. It's evolving. We're at the same stage that Microsoft was at in the 1980s. If people knew what company to invest in cybersecurity, because there's going to be a giant or two, Apple, Microsoft, Google, that's going to come out of the cybersecurity industry, then investors would be making billions of dollars just by funding those companies or buying their stock. But for a small business owner, like with you designing the website, I'd say the best thing you can do is also be as involved as possible. Just don't, let them run with it by themselves, because you might not be satisfied. I would set some milestones with them so that you can stop, catch your breath, see how it's going, not just say, okay, show me at the end. Because that's where the misunderstandings will happen.
But is that why in some websites I'm noticing lately, especially when you need to buy something and it's a small business, they'll direct you to PayPal or Venmo and tell you how to find them. So is that kind of a workaround of saying, okay, I'm not going to take payment on my site and get your information on my site. I'm going to direct you to my PayPal account, my Venmo account, then to collect those funds instead of exposing myself to collecting and storing that information.
Well, I think that's very valid. Great point. I mean, the PayPal and Venmo and security for these kind of companies is going to be head and shoulders above someone that's just doing one or two websites at a time, and just setting up, pay as you go. So I think there's a big security coming with a big company like PayPal. The thing is, you're going to pay a significant amount too, so you got to be putting that into your overhead and saying, okay, if I charge $20, then $4 may go out to whoever is doing my billing for me. The thing is, you'll know that it's supposedly done right, but you'll have much better security.
It comes back to the principle of insurance, right? So, cyber carriers will be more comfortable with me when I go to get coverage, telling them, look, I'm offering this conference, and of course I'm gonna have to let my carrier know that. So if there's a loss, I'm covered. But in order to I can tell them, look, I'm not building the site. I am transferring that risk. I'm transferring that risk to a company that really knows what they're doing. And I'm willing to pay that amount of money, or I'm willing to bake that in to my registration fee to make sure that I'm limiting any possibility of a loss.
Yeah, I mean, that makes perfect sense to me. It's completely valid. As you said, there's more and more people these days that are using PayPal for small businesses, medium business, even big businesses. I've bought equipment at some of the biggest places, and they've directed me to PayPal. So it's not just little streaming services that are trying to get off the ground, or startups, or a dog groomer, who I do pay through PayPal.
Right.
But it's everybody that wants to have that kind of security of a third-party vendor. But they also have to bake it in, like you said. They may not have the margin to be able to do that.
Right.
Someone else could undercut them. But I think for what you're trying to do, that's a pretty good point.
So let's talk about ransomware and your stat regarding hospitals. When we first met and we started talking about this podcast series, videocast series, and you had pointed out the pervasive nature of ransomware with hospitals, I was actually surprised. Can you explain why hospitals are being targeted?
Because it's the difference between life and death. People are dying, and the average person doesn't realize it, but thousands of people have died because of data breaches. I know that sounds crazy, but when you break it down, if a hospital's machines are shut down, how can they service their patients? Say someone gets a gunshot wound, right? That it's a matter of minutes whether they're going to live or die.
Right.
Hospital rushes them to the ambulance rushes them to the hospital, and the hospital can't take that poor person because they have no equipment there. and their facilities are basically shut down. I think 47% of hospitals have experienced some kind of shutdown in the last 5 years due to data breaches, and that number is mind-blowing, but when hackers can get into the electrical systems, when they can shut down machines, when they can mess with the records, a hospital's not going to want to have a patient that is allergic to some kind of drug, and they get rushed to the hospital, they're in the ER, and they can give them the drug that'll kill them, but their records are sealed because of ransomware. In many, many cases, the ambulances are diverted to other places. So in the last 2 years alone, there's been studies done that it's like I said, in the thousands. IT Healthcare News had reported 2,100 patients had died in 1 year because of being turned away from the hospitals, or that their machines were shut down.
Right. And it's really sad that they are targeting hospitals, and that then the hospital has no choice. They absolutely have to figure out quickly how they're going to get out of that situation, and most of the time it will be negotiating and paying some kind of ransom. There's actually coverage for this. The carrier not only will cover the ransomware, but they will cover the negotiation. They will have somebody that is an expert at contacting the person ransoming you and negotiate a resolution for that ransom. But really having the right systems in place, having that backup, that other system that's ready to jump in when they ransom and turn this off over here, really is the matter between as Johnny, as you put it, life and death?
If I was in an emergency situation, I can't even imagine how I'd be feeling going to a hospital and they have to turn me away. Or even worse, someone in my family that might be suffering from a heart attack, a seizure, blood clot. There's so many things that can be taken care of if the hospital's up and running in 100% condition.
Right.
But if there's any kind of slight glitch, it can, be the end of someone. And I just want to make this clear. Don't glamorize hackers and scammers. They're heartless bastards. They're trying to get something from nothing, and they don't care how they get it. I actually was on one show, and I had said that exact thing, that hackers are misfits and scammers are heartless bastards, and they wound up doing a 2-part show on me, and that was the title that they used for each show. First one I think was hackers are ruthless bastards and scammers are misfits. So it was very appropriate though, because as we go about our daily life, we don't know how pervasive this really is. We're one step away from having our electrical grid shut down. We're one step away from having a food chain supply issue. We're one step away from having a terrorist attack on a nuclear power facility. We're one step away from our dams, being attacked, and say a hacker group, they do a ransom on just a dam. There was something over 84,000 dams in the United States alone that are taller than 50 feet high.
Right.
And they could take over the spillways that relieve the pressure for the dams, and that would actually make the dams flood the area below them. So can you imagine how many people would die just because these guys either A, don't know what they're doing, because it's not the greatest thing to learn on the job, whether it's with a dam or whether it's a nuclear facility, right? They could kill tens of thousands of people by accident. But B, just the heartlessness of it just kills me. I just don't understand it.
It's a cyber race, right? So they get to this point, we try to get to this point, and then they get to this point. It just keeps kind of going around and around in a circle. And what is troubling is whenever you have conditions like that, where you have losses, you have critical services that need to continue, and they do need resources to help them do that, then what does this equal? It equals costs spiraling out of control. And Johnny, I know you have a few slides to demonstrate just what is happening with that.
Mm-hmm. Sure. Well, if we just talk about your specialty, the cybersecurity insurance market, right? 2020, $6 billion industry. 1 year, it jumped to an industry that was over $7.5 billion in policies that were written. But estimates are by 2028, that industry could go to over $35 billion. That shows the need of it, right? I mean, in just a few short years, it didn't double, it didn't triple. It's 6 times what it was.
Right.
And every business needs cybersecurity insurance. So you're in a great business.
So could I back up a bit? I want to analogize this to California in the early 2000s. So if you lived in California in the early 2000s and you went to a Costco, you had to sign a petition before you went into Costco that you would help reform workers' compensation costs in California. Those costs were out of control. So for every $100 of payroll, you have to pay a certain amount for coverage. Different types of insurance work different ways. But workers' compensation, it's a certain dollar amount for every $100 of payroll based on what you do. Back in the early 2000s, it was around $6 for every $100 of payroll. Right now it's right around $2 or a buck. I think it was like right around $1.50. So really think about that. So what did we do to get it back to $1.50? Legislative changes, resources, creative solutions. In 1995, John, did you know what a risk manager was?
Actually, I did. Not for insurance, but we were doing disaster recovery in the 1980s. And I started in the field in the early 1980s. So, I mean, by the 1990s, we knew what to really expect. I mean, I thought cybersecurity field, and I had been telling people for years and years, 20, 30 years ago, that it was going to be the next big thing. In fact, I went through an IBM programming school. I learned 4 languages in 1982. And when I graduated, they had said, what do you want to do? And I said, well, I want to work in computer and in industry, but as a security guy,
Right.
Computer security, because there was no such sexy word like cybersecurity.
Right.
And no one knew about it. And so when I said that, the head of the program that was interviewing me said, what's that?
Right.
Because there was no one doing it. And there was so little attacks on us for years and years and years that when the cuts would come from IT, it would always be in that kind of area because no one really expected to be hacked. But then the love bug virus came around, and the I love you virus, and that was one of the things that got people more alert about emails, because they'd get an email that says I love you. What's more tempting
Sure.
than that to
Right.
click that on? But that devastated governments. That cost tens of billions of dollars in damage.
Right.
So people became a little more alert. But with risk management, where you're coming from, no, we didn't really deal with the cybersecurity insurance because there was no industry back in those days.
So what I'm talking about is that, back in the early 2000s, the late 90s, the amount of injuries people were experiencing, the amount of money it was costing to get these claims resolved was not sustainable. So how did they solve that problem? They created a C-suite position that really didn't exist before, and that was a risk manager. And so the risk manager was responsible for understanding how to finance that risk, how to prevent it, and when it happened, how to mitigate it. We are at a critical point right now with cybersecurity. We absolutely need to rethink the model as to how we look at it, how we finance it, how we prevent it, how we mitigate it. We've done very creative things in insurance with pulling people together into what you call groups, right? Insurance groups, captive groups, self-insured groups. With the stats here, cyber insurance will be unaffordable and the system will not be sustainable. We have to do something drastic quickly to prevent that from happening. And those are the 3 things that we always talk about on this video cast. Prevention, education, mitigation, making sure that you don't let it happen again. And with those things, and having somebody, either if you're a small to medium-sized business, hiring somebody like Johnny. If Johnny has 20 companies that hire him and he spends 5 hours a week on each one, guess what? They're going to have a less likely event of having a major loss than absent doing something like that. So it's almost a call to action it's almost a call to action. We have to start thinking about building a better mousetrap and avoiding that exponential increase in costs in 2028.
Well, Eddie, the problem is there's not enough people to go around like me. And there's 4 million vacant cybersecurity related jobs that just can't be filled right now. So we need people to come into our field. We need you in our industry right now, because the hackers are growing by leaps and bounds, because you know how you say necessity is the mother of invention.
Right.
Well, I say desperation is the father of necessity. During the last couple of years with COVID, a lot of people became desperate and did things they never would have done before. And they started to do hacking and scamming, and they didn't know really anything about programming. They never did anything criminal in their lives. But we had talked on another show about the dark web and how you could buy programs that'll go out and seek exposures, and,
Right.
and it's all one-stop shopping these days. So, I think that A, there's not enough people to go around. We need more people to do it. And B, it's a great industry to be in because it's pretty much recession proof. And your industry, I read up some stats, $1.2 trillion in policies were written last year. For one industry, $1.2 trillion.
Right.
And that was things like, car insurance and fire insurance. Cybersecurity is just a blip on the radar right now. It's nothing. But when cybersecurity gets to be $100 billion of that pie, $200 billion, $300 billion, because you realize every company needs to have cybersecurity insurance.
Right.
Now, will they all qualify? No.
Well, insurance is a law of large numbers. Insurance is the law of large numbers. So the more people you have in the system, the better off you are. And the more predictable the losses are, the better off you are from a perspective of writing insurance and paying losses. The problem right now with cyber loss is that it is unpredictable, it is dynamic, and it's expensive. And those are three things that carriers do not like. So to your point, if we can get young people excited, we can get entrepreneurs in here to build solutions, build services, models that are effective, we get to a point where you have enough people in the system buying these types of policies, but are doing things they need to do to prevent the losses, mitigate the losses, then we'll get to a point where the insurance is affordable and that people are actually able to secure payment for their losses and able to secure insurance if they have a loss.
That brings up a question that I was going to ask you as the expert. Is it feasible that, say, 10 companies form a collective and are able to get a bundled insurance plan for all of them because they can't afford it by themselves? But like you say, there's power in numbers. So could they do that?
Great question. Absolutely. It's done today. It's done today in lots of different types of verticals. Workers' compensation, you have what is called self-insured groups. You have insured groups. You have captive groups. Captives are basically an insurance company where either one company or a number of companies will come together and they will invest money in an offshore captive or an onshore captive where they earn money tax-free, and that money is what is used to pay the loss. So I always encourage small to medium-sized companies that think that would be an impossible feat for them. It's not. You need 1 to 2 companies that are interested, that are paying too much for their insurance. It could be cyber, it could be work comp, it could be general liability. If you're paying too much and you are very good at limiting losses, you have a very good loss prevention culture, then you absolutely can band together with companies in a similar vertical, restaurants, movie theaters, hospitals, hotels, auto dealerships, what have you, and you can become a very powerful customer in purchasing insurance and hiring people to administer the claims and hiring somebody like me to manage that process and make sure that we do everything we can to prevent losses and mitigate losses.
Well, we're going to save a whole show for this because I have just a ton of ideas. I've been in articles as the expert about cybersecurity insurance and my visions for the future. But I'll throw out a little tidbit right there. It's going to change radically. Based on my corporate experience, a lot of times would have, like I remember we had a supercomputer that I was in charge of that was worth $4 million in the mid-'80s. $4 million. So with something that expensive, we had employees from that company on site that actually did a partnership with us, and they stayed there. With cybersecurity insurance, there's going to be situations where a company won't insure some smaller company unless they can go in and do the compliance checking themselves.
Right.
That they could have, bigger company might have an employee based there
Right.
all the time to check it. So there'll be these partnerships coming up that, have you ever seen that before yet?
I have not, but I think it's absolutely on the horizon because it's all about risk. And again, if a carrier is going to take on that risk, they are going to want assurances that everything's being done to limit loss.
Well, right now, from my conversations with you. We've talked a lot about it, but it's basically the honor system in a lot of ways, right?
It really is.
When people are doing their policies, they fill out a little quiz of what they're doing. Some of the times they just fill it out. They probably don't even know too much about it themselves.
That's absolutely correct.
It's just the best guess.
That's right.
That's not going to fly in the future.
Right.
There's going to have to be an analysis that's done sort of like an audit, where they have to basically be brought up to a compliant stance before a company will even think about risking taking out and providing them with a policy. So that's my guess. We're going to talk about that for a whole show because I've got a ton of ideas. We're going to also have a whole show on where the justice system is going, because there's going to be a whole separate branch of the judicial system that has to come up just for cybersecurity. Otherwise, the justice system is going to be overwhelmed. Can you imagine the back and forth fighting between an insurance provider and a company when they try to claim that they were breached, and then you find out it was self-inflicted, or to make it the policy, or that they just were laissez-faire about it? Who wants to pay out $2 million to a company that didn't bother to be compliant? So we're going to have a whole episode just on the justice system. Maybe we'll have a two-parter. Who knows? But there's a lot of things that we're going to cover, and we want you guys to definitely join us and participate.
Thanks, John.
Well, how can folks reach you, Eddy? Is there a best way?
They can find me at my website at betterwithalta.com. Betterwithalta.com. That's ALTA. Or you can also call our office at 877-ALTA-111. 877-ALTA-111.
Okay, for me, there's tons of ways to get to me. My cyberdef.tv website, that'll trigger things if you contact me there. Or you can send me an email at contracts@cyberd.tv. If you're a hacker, don't bother sending me a link because I'm not going to go for it. Contracts@cyberd.tv. Also, you can call my phone for my company also at 714-450-2994. So it's been a real great experience, Eddy. Another super podcast that we did together.
Thanks, John.
And look forward to many more.
Me too.